Okay, we're going.
I could talk about every one of these, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll talk about, I'm going to mention the change in funerals. Well, way back, we always had funerals in church, and they had, the body would be up in the front. And then after the service, they marched around. Everybody marched around. And some people stopped in front of the casket and would cry, and the family was sitting right there, and it was it was just the custom of the day. That's the way it was done.
Open casket.
Open casket, and people marched at the very end. They marched around to say their last goodbyes. That's what it was. The intention was to say their last goodbyes. And when my father-in-law died in 1956, we didn't really like that practice, so we changed it. But it was in June, so it made it easier to do it. Everybody of the congregation walked outside, and then my father-in-law's casket was left in the entry. And then the family went out very last, and they shut the outside door, so we were in there with him alone, and said our goodbyes to him there. And after we did that, I think that was the last time. I don't think anybody ever walked around after that. But they used to have two services. They had the funeral at the house. They would say 1:30 at the house and 2 o'clock at church. And they would come to the homes, and the casket and the body would be in the living room of the home, and the pastor would have a prayer, and sometimes they would have a hymn, or sometimes a soloist. It would be a short service, which is kind of a goodbye for the deceased, for his or her home. And then they would get into a funeral procession. The pastor would drive first, I think, and then the hearse, and then the family would come by, and the people would drive slowly. You didn't drive fast, you drove slowly up to church. And then at 2 o'clock you had the regular church service. And I don't know if I don't remember them having lunch at church in olden days until later on we started serving, lunch afterwards. But those were some of the things that were a little bit different than we do it now.
Right.
But I guess customs evolve. We change from time to time, and that was one of the things I know. When I was a little girl at home, we used to watch the funeral procession. If it went by our house, we counted the cars, and we wanted to see how many there were that came from the home to the church. And it was just a game we had, I guess. I guess we thought, well, maybe the more cars a person had, the more important the person was. I don't know.
Right.
And I remember the flowers. I think they've taken the odor out of roses, because there used to be such an odor in church with flowers in those days. I wonder what's different, but I can smell it yet. When I first started, I sang a lot of solos for funerals, and when I first started singing solos, there was those heavy odor. It didn't bother me, but I remember the heavy odor of the flowers from the funerals that I don't smell anymore. I think they've changed. The flowers are being bred a different way.
Could be.
Something, but and I guess I don't think I can think of anything more about funerals. But I do remember this going around in the front, and I think it was very difficult for the family, because they were right in back of where people were walking, and if they should stop and cry or something, then the family would. So that certainly has changed.
Yes.
Over the years.
And they were embalmed?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there was no, what am I thinking of? What they do now?
Oh, cremate.
Yeah, there was no cremation.
No.
That's quite recent. Quite recent. Not everybody is yet, but
Right.
that's quite a recent custom. And I don't know who was I don't remember how long ago it was that the first one. Not too many years ago.
No.
I don't think. We did go to Bible camp. I think it's already been mentioned by somebody else that this was in the late 30s, and we didn't feel like nobody of the farm girls had enough money to stay in the dorm. I mean, that you had to pay. So we rented 2 years. I remember we rented a cabin down there. One was Herman Fisher's, and the little yellow cabin at the end. We were a whole bunch of farm girls, and Esther Jacobson was one of our group, and she was a little older, and she could probably cook and stuff. So we cooked for ourselves. We brought food from home, cooked for ourselves in our cabin, and then we went to all the sessions. They had different sessions in the morning and some musical things, but we stayed in those cabins because, like I say, we didn't feel like we could afford to stay in the dorm. But it was a fun time. We were at that time we were Lutheran Free Church.
Okay.
So we weren't as large a group as we are now. We didn't take up as, I know there were people from Montevideo there, but now it's the whole United States, So but they sent pastors out from the seminary, and we had good teachers. I'm sure we could have learned a lot if we had listened.
Was there singing at camp too?
Oh yeah, lots of singing. I think Lutherans are always big on singing. That's their thing. They like, and I remember at night they would have a campfire in front of the dormitory, and then some people would go out on Lake Cronus in a boat, and then they'd have some antiphonal singing where we would sing, and then they would sing back to us, and like that,
Nice.
And it was real fun for kids. We had a nice fire, and well, we did a few naughty things too, but I guess I better not talk about that. Building the Sunday school edition. That was really a couples club project. We came back from the war, or the men did, and we came. Everybody had so many kids. It was kids all over the place, And when we used to have Sunday school, we had it right in the main church. We just sat in the pews, like 5 classes. I mean, you couldn't concentrate. It was terrible. And I think May Sealand was one of those that really worked for. Well, we all did, but May had the idea, and Audrey to an Adaine, I think. And then the Couples Club took it on as a project, kind of. And so we said we had to get. Well, some people said no. If we build onto the church, we'll just wreck the beautiful look of the church. We'll just spoil the look of the church. It won't look right. And we thought, well, educating our children was more important than what the church looked like, So then we thought, well, how are we going to earn money? Well, Ivan Anderson was raising chickens at that time, and he had to have them loaded out. And so he hired the Couples Club to come and catch them. And I think we caught 25,000 each time. And you had to do it after dark. They had dark light, and the chickens would just sit, kind of squat down. And us women would catch them. We caught 3 in each hand. We had 6 chickens, and then the men would carry them to the truck. And we did that. And I have some pictures someplace of that. We looked pretty raunchy by the time we got through. It was probably 1 or 2 in the morning, before we got through. But I don't know how much we raised, but several. Well, we didn't get paid more than $75 for each time. That was
a piece.
No, for the whole thing for $75. But we did it many times, so I suppose maybe I don't know. There must be a record someplace of what we left. But then I think finally people realized we were serious. Mm-hmm. The congregation realized we were serious. There was still some opposition, but I guess there always is. And so then people started donating money too. Mm-hmm. And so we got started, and then we have it now. It's still being used. It's needed a little updating from time to time, but it was really a wonderful addition.
Yes, that's quite a memory too.
Yeah, quite. Were you here?
No.
You weren't here then?
No.
Yeah, we'll never forget the catching chickens, that's for sure. I mean,
that is a
I don't
story.
know who I got to take care of the kids. My mother must have come over. Or maybe they were old enough maybe Kay was old enough to take care of them.
Did you have lunch then?
Yes,
we
had lunch.
In the morning?
We had lunch. I have some pictures of it. I don't know how we ate. We were so full of dust and chicken, I don't know, whatever.
Yes.
But that's a memory I don't think anybody that's done it will ever forget. And we had a few people that helped us besides the Couples Club. There was a few that didn't belong to Couples Club that came and helped. Mm-hmm. And I remember especially Reverend, no, not Reverend Larson, Reverend Hagen. And he would come and help us. He was kind of a tall man, and he said thank you. Every time I gave him a chicken, he said thank you. And so he was so polite. And we were quite a group by the time the night was over. We looked pretty raunchy.
I suppose you didn't have to take out a loan for that addition.
I don't think we took out a loan, I wonder if, I think Chester was treasurer of that project. But I don't think Nordland's ever taken out a loan. Yeah. That I recall. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
We must have had to take out a loan for something. I don't know, but usually if the congregation has felt there is a need, the money seems to come in. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that'll continue. Yes. At one time in the church, I don't know if anybody has mentioned this, there was an old bachelor that had some land out in South Dakota. And he in his will, he left the land to the 3 churches in the area, to Nordland, to Zion, and to the mission. It was the mission church, and now it's evangelical free. Mm-hmm. But and for years, I think they just had to. Don't think they did anything with it, and they finally sold it because I think they were having to pay some taxes on it. So, mm-hmm. And it was quite close to where the oil is now. But
wow.
But I always wondered how close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know. But
so he grew up in the area?
He grew up in the area. I don't even know what church he belonged to, if he went to church at all. But he was a bachelor, mm-hmm. and he left his land to the 3 churches, which was a nice thing to do, I think.
Yes.
Well, I can't think of anything else. Luther League, I could mention, that we didn't have church every Sunday. We were a double parish with New London. And so we had church, they had church in the morning, and then, I don't know if it was every other week, I think we had church at night. They for a young people's service. Mm-hmm. And the pastor gave the sermon at night. But I think it was the late 50s before we had a pastor where we had this own service every Sunday.
Oh.
Otherwise, it was Sunday night.
Okay.
And the young people of the day had a fundraiser, and they put in an electric light plant. It was a gas engine.
Mm-hmm.
Gas engine. I can hear it yet. It go pop, 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 pop. And that put up lights, because there was no REA. The REA didn't come through until about, I know, at our home we got it in 1937.
Okay.
So in the early 30s, they had this gas engine that provided lights.
Wow.
You remember that?
No.
I mean, in your church? Or,
Oh yeah, I've heard the story.
Mhm.
Yes.
And that was pretty modern, to, get electric lights. I don't know what they did before. I guess there was lamps hanging around,
Yes.
but I don't remember that. That was before my day. I've seen pictures of it. That's all. And at the Luther League, it was a real good forum for young people. They had a program. They had lots of children, not children, anybody could give a reading, or if you took piano lessons, you probably practiced your first songs at Luther League.
Okay.
You had a program, and hymns, of course, and the pastor would give a devotion, and that's the way it was. Not as formal as the Sunday morning service. It was quite informal.
Yes.
But it was such a good forum for young people to practice like their piano lessons. They got to, and everybody clapped for them. And I don't remember, did we have lunch?
You must have had lunch.
You must have had lunch?
Must have had
Must have had lunch. Yeah, I guess maybe we did. I know we had New Year's Eve lunch. And like Kathy mentioned, that they had cream chicken on mashed potatoes, or mostly mashed potatoes. And then we had a big dinner. We had a program first. It started at 8 o'clock. In those days, they started at 8 because all the farmers milked cows. It all started at 8. And they had about an hour program from 8 to 9. And then at 9 o'clock, we go down and have a big supper. I mean, the cream chicken on mashed potatoes and the vegetable, and I remember Jell-O, always Jell-O. And then kind of a fellowship hour. And then at 11:30, we always went back up to the main service and had a couple of hymns, and the pastor maybe said something. And then at 12 o'clock sharp, they would ring the bell. They'd ring out the old year and ring in the new. And I remember one year, I think it was when Pastor Ashbrook was here. It was bitterly cold, like in the 24 below zero. And he said he thought it was dangerous to stay there so long. So we kind of had the ringing in the new year early.
Oh.
Because he said it was dangerous for people to be out on the road. And so that year we had a little bit early New Year.
Is that the year you stopped doing it, do you think?
No, we stopped doing it about in the late 70s, I think. The young people, the younger people wanted to have their own parties. They wanted their own New Year's party at home. They didn't want to come to church anymore. And it kind of died down slowly, and finally there was just not enough people to carry on. So we haven't had it for... Have you had it since you were here?
Yes, I remember going to one, for sure, one.
Okay.
Vince and I. Yeah.
Was it the late 70s?
Yeah, it would have been mid to late 70s, yeah.
Yeah. In my memory, I think it was late 70s that we... But it was carried on for many, many years. It was a big, big deal. New Year's Eve and the fest and the Lutefisk supper, they were the things that we looked forward to. And the fest, I laugh about that nowadays. The fest, I remember we always got new shoes for the fest.
Really?
white shoes, and that was a mistake because it was all dusty, dusty down at the park, and I was kind of a goofy kid. I'd run down the hill, and my shoes would get all dusty. And nowadays they wear sandals, I suppose, or
Sure.
yeah. But no, you dressed up for the fest.
So you wore a dress to the fest?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah. You always were.
wow.
Well, wore dresses all over. We wore dresses to school. If you wore slacks in the winter, if it was very cold, you might wear slacks, but you had to take them off and hang them in the cloakroom. You had to wear a dress. Now that was a big change in the way people dress in church.
Yes.
And we always, my kids, we wore our best. We wore our best things to church.
What about hats? For
Oh
ladies?
yes, yeah. Especially I wore a hat until I started to sing in choir, and then when you sing in choir, you really can't wear a hat. So that took care of that. But for my daughters, always had hats at Easter, and I'd sewed new dresses for them, Yeah, and the boys would wear ties and suits or jackets. That's completely different now.
Yes.
Yeah, you wore your best to church, and the men all wore suits. All wore suits.
Even
No.
in the summer? Hot summer
Oh yeah,
day?
I think so. Yeah, I think they were. I think even the pastor wore his robe in summer. I don't remember. Who was the first pastor that didn't wear a robe in summer? I know Reverend Larson was very formal. He didn't want anybody behind the altar ring even to help with communion. That was kind of a holy of holy place to him. But now I think it's so much better now because the young people, the kids get to take part,
Right.
and they feel included. Where I can't say that I really felt included. I was afraid of the pastor, and we had. Well, I did not goof off, but I mean some young kids did. We knew we couldn't do that.